Good evening and welcome to my recital, Oboe Tapas. When I conceived of this concert program very early in the spring semester, I had considered a concert that would engage the audience in a different way than we usually expect in a concert hall. And so I had expected scenery and audience members up on stage with me. Given the pandemic that we're experiencing currently, I have had the opportunity through the spring and the summer and into the fall to consider again how we could make music differently for a variety of audiences. And this program is the result of my thoughts. So, my hope is that each of you listening from a remote location will have opportunity to eat and drink. You will notice that with the program, I've made recommendations, some of them cheeky or inspired by the pieces that I'll be playing. And so, I hope you're finding a place where you can be comfortable, listen, eat, and enjoy also some visual elements that I've provided for you on the screen tonight. Our first piece is called Far Over the Misty Mountains by a composer named Laura Elise Schwendinger, who teaches at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Professor Schwendinger came out and was the featured guest at our Festival of Contemporary Art Music a few years ago, and I had the privilege of working on this piece with her at the time. I love the way that this piece shows the peaks and valleys and the challenges and of exploring mountainous terrain, and I hope you enjoy the experience with me. along with giving you little bite-sized pieces of music, my goal with this concert is to give you bite-sized pieces of information about each of the works on the program. This next piece is Six Metamorphoses After Ovid by Benjamin Britten, and it is a wonderful piece for solo oboe that students play in their undergraduate, graduate, and professional levels. It's one of my favorite pieces in all of our repertoire. In it, Britten has picked 6 stories about metamorphosis, transformation, from Ovid's text. And the first one of these is entitled Pan, our little half goat boy, half boy. It romps around, he plays music, he gets into trouble. In this particular story, he is enamored of a nymph named Syrinx, and not wanting to be caught by Pan, Syrinx begs a goddess to change her, and she is changed into a bamboo shoot that Pan picks, not realizing it was his beloved, and makes instead into a flute for him to play on. So Britten has given us little texts that go along with each movement of this piece to tell you exactly what part of the transformation or what part of the story is happening as we're listening. And so for Pan, Britten writes, Pan, who played upon the reed pipe, which was Syrinx, his beloved. Britten's fourth movement is titled Bacchus, after the character whose feasts are wild and contain much revelry and usually a little bit of wine to go as well. Bacchus himself doesn't go through transformation in Ovid's telling, and so instead what Britten provides us with here are 3 beginning sections, each of which move very quickly into the next, and a 4th section that, in my opinion, marries the elements of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd sections together to close. Britten does give us some text to go along with this and allows us then to think of those 3 earlier sections perhaps as the elements that he describes here. Bacchus, at whose feasts is heard the noise of gaggling women's tattling tongues and the shouting out of boys. In the sixth and final movement of Britten's work for solo oboe, we encounter Arethusa, who was a nymph that was beloved by Alpheus, who was a god of water. She wants to remain chaste and runs from him. She prays to the goddess Artemis and asks her to transform her into something. And she's transformed into a cloud. And she gets nervous and she can feel herself start to sweat, which creates her own trickle of water. Alpheus is able to locate her and mingle the waters together. You can hear some of this in the piece. We have some really beautiful trills in the middle part of this movement. And for me, that always sounds like when Arethusa is transforming and feeling that sweat or the rivulets drop off of her skin. And so I hope you'll listen for that and the conclusion of Britten's Six Metamorphoses after Ovid, Arethusa, who, flying from the love of Alpheus, the river god, was turned into a fountain. Telemon's 12 fantasies were originally written for flute, but they are often borrowed by oboists, and I'm excited to be able to play the second one of these for you this evening. One of the beauties of this piece is that Telemon does not limit the wind instrument to playing a single melodic line, but you'll hear a lot of counterpoint along with those beautiful melodic features that we would expect from this composer. It's virtuosic, it's really enjoyable to figure out which notes belong to melody and which belong to bass, as it's a solo piece for just oboe or flute. You might notice on your menu pairings that I have included for this work a number of German finger foods. I will note now that the Telemann fantasy I have chosen is about 4 or 5 minutes in length, and it might be a little bit of a challenge for you to try out all 4 of the materials we've provided, you may want to give yourself a little bit of extra time with those. And I do hope that you'll enjoy the food while you're listening to the music. I have paired this as well with German artwork from artists at the time that Telemann was composing. And so you'll listen to these 4 movements, and I hope that you like the artwork and enjoy the food as well. Antal Doherty's Five Pieces for Solo Oboe is a really athletic, virtuosic romp for the instrumentalist and hopefully a lot of fun for the audience as well. I've selected two movements to play for you this evening, the first of which is the first in the series and is called The Grasshopper and the Ant. It is based on Aesop's fable of that fun-loving, easygoing grasshopper and the very industrious ant who are engaged in conversation in the fall after the ant has gathered all the supplies necessary for the winter. So in this piece, you can hear this very leaping, wonderfully energetic gestures of the grasshopper to start, and the very stepwise, industrious, quick-moving sounds of the ant in the lower register. And you'll hear them start to talk with each other further, and eventually I think you'll hear the grasshopper begging for mercy from the ant, and I will let you, as you hear this performance, figure out what the ant's final response is. I am glad to take this opportunity to thank WSU's School of Music, our facilities coordinator Sandra Albers, stage technician Sean Sorensen, and WSU's academic outreach and innovation team of Scott Vick and Brian Varner, who all played a role in putting this concert together this evening. And now I am glad to leave you with the fifth movement of Doherty's Five Pieces for Solo Oboe, a little lullaby that I hope you will enjoy with a mug of warm milk.
We are still making music and need your help more than ever.
Please donate today to help us as we prepare for the future of music and the performing arts.
Online at music.wsu.edu/I want to give.